Iowa Republicans are trying to drastically limit what types of food that people in the state can buy using SNAP benefits. Iowa Republicans introduced a bill on January 11th, which requested a waiver from the USDA to let the state limit the foods that can be purchased with SNAP benefits inside the state. So for anyone who doesn't know, SNAP is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. It's also known as food stamps. Now, this is a federal assistance program for people with low to no income. And although the program is run by the USDA and they pay for 100% of the cost for the food assistance, the federal and state governments split the administrative cost 50-50. Okay, that's out of the way. So what exactly do these Iowa Republicans want to limit with their new bill? Time reported that the bill, which 39 Republicans co-sponsored, would require SNAP recipients to have a more restrictive list of food items they can buy that would mirror the food approved for the state's current Women, Infants, and Children program, otherwise known as WIC. It would also require an asset limit on SNAP participants, and Medicare recipients would need to work at least 20 hours a week to receive benefits. HuffPost also reported on the story. In lieu of fresh meat, canned salmon and tuna would be allowed, according to a list of Iowa's approved WIC foods. In addition to pantry staples like flour and oil, other prohibited items would include canned soup and sliced cheese. Only brown and not white rice would be permitted, and shoppers would have to swap white bread and pasta for 100% whole grain versions, even if you live in an area where you can't access whole grain options. You still won't be able to purchase the white bread or non-whole grain pasta, because that makes sense. So a lot of nonprofit groups and activist organizations have been raising the alarm on the detrimental impact this bill would have if it goes into law. And one group that has been very vocal about this is the Iowa Hunger Coalition, which according to its website is an association of organizations and individuals committed to ending hunger in Iowa. So Luke Elzinga, the chair of the nonprofit, told Iowa's News Now that Iowans on SNAP would not be able to buy meat, flour, butter, cooking oil, frozen prepared foods. It's a huge list. If you're living in poverty and using a program, and there's already so much stigma around SNAP, to then be told we're going to police the food that you can get is incredibly damaging to people's mental health. So how exactly are Iowa Republicans justifying introducing this bill and limiting the foods that people on SNAP are able to buy? Time reported that according to House Republicans, the proposal currently being discussed in subcommittees would help cut costs. It's these entitlement programs. They're the ones that are growing within the budget and are putting pressure on us being able to fund other priorities. House Speaker Pat Grassley told KCCI, a Des Moines news outlet. And if you are wondering, yes, Pat Grassley is related to Senator Chuck Grassley. He is his grandson. Little dynasty of politics out there in Iowa. But right now I want you to think back to what I told you at the beginning of this about how the program is funded. The money for the food comes directly from the federal government, and the state and federal government split administrative costs 50-50. Changing the program and the way this bill wants to do would drastically increase the administrative costs of operating the program. So if this bill becomes law, Iowa would be spending more money, not less. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a great analysis that you have there, where you're talking about the administrative costs and having to pick and choose and now have to flag what people who are on SNAP and receiving these SNAP or WIC benefits, what they're buying. But the hypocrisy, which let's take for a given that doesn't matter in politics, especially not for the Republican Party, but take the layers of hypocrisy down by down. Like I remember back in the day, the Obama administration, where they were where Michelle Obama was getting a bunch of flack because they didn't have much to talk about, because she was saying, okay, let's try to have healthier foods in schools and try to promote those kinds of things. And Sarah Palin was turning around saying, let's have pizza and whatever we want to at our schools and not let Michelle Obama and these food czars, because that was the world that we lived in about 10 years ago, control what people are eating. Now Republicans are doing that and they don't bat an eye. Layer number one. Layer number two, like this, it almost looks like they're doing a similar thing of promoting, okay, these are healthier foods, but then it just gets unnecessarily, oh, you can't have frozen foods like frozen vegetables. You can't have like cooking oil. It's needlessly insane. And all it's meant to do is not just stigmatize the mental health, the physical health, like all kinds of things to make it harder on people who are already struggling. And there is, last point, grocery stores everywhere, like food banks, they talk about how much food gets thrown out and how much food waste we have in America, in the entire world, day after day, week after week, year after year. There is no reason why we as a developed country cannot feed everyone. So the idea that it would cost more, or we would save any money rather, to run this kind of program, not just for the extra administrative costs you mentioned, but just for the fact that we have the effing food, is ridiculous. And everyone should detest that kind of like explanation.
Yeah, and I also want to point out that, of course, their justification was that they need to save money or whatever. The Iowa government has a budget surplus, so they're not, they're not penny pinching over in Iowa. They have money. And to the point of they're saving money on the cost of food, despite the fact that the federal government provides that money, they're not providing that money. I mean, it's just really gross. But I think overall, what's really bothering me is this idea that they have this right to police what poor people eat. This idea that if you just ate healthier, somehow you wouldn't be poor. That if you stopped buying the food that's probably available at the limited grocery stores in your area, and started buying from Whole Foods or something, or started buying all fresh food, which doesn't last as long, which is not necessarily feasible for a lot of families who don't have the ability to go to the grocery store every single day to buy new fresh food, or every couple of days or every week or whatever. Sometimes they need to buy in larger quantities of frozen food so that they have their meals ready to go, for their children, for themselves. And it's really gross. And I'm sick and tired of Republicans trying to limit what poor people can do just on the basis of them being poor. It really is. It all boils down to capitalism.
And they've been doing it for decades. So yeah. Like what's old is new again, really, with them.
Absolutely. I will say one last point before we go to break. Michelle Obama was doing her food initiative when I was in high school, and I'll never forgive her for making the donut man stop coming to school selling donuts.
Oh no, I didn't experience that. We still had our popsicles, our Otter Pops that we could buy for 50 cents when I was a kid. So like that was all fine.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.